Thank you, guys. It's really good to share the stage with these guys. I've really enjoyed working with them, and the work that they're doing is pretty awesome. The part I get to do is talk about training up a child in the way that he should go. It's a proverb that we've always have been, I guess you could say, beat up with. and we're not here to beat you up, okay? This morning. We're here to encourage you and to help you and support you. Does anybody know what this is? It's got kind of it's got a Torx wrench on it. It doesn't have an Allen wrench. It's my chainsaw tool. It's a multi-tool. And I can put this in my pouch and carry it with me, and I can, when the chain jumps off the chainsaw in the middle of the woods, I don't have to walk all the way back and find the right tool to do all that. And so it's very handy. So because it's always the little limbs that throw the chain off, and then it's like, oh man, I just got started. This is frustrating. And so I found this one day, and I was like, that's pretty sweet. I like tools. Do you like tools? Yeah. All the guys like, yeah, we like tools. All right. And so having the right tool is very beneficial, isn't it? I mean, we all have, especially guys, we all have tried to use a tool for its not intended purpose, for a purpose that we intend it to accomplish, right? And so as parents and children, as we begin to look at this, I do want you to understand that we come from the idea that there were, I said this a long time ago, and I thought it was pretty interesting, out of the 80 great civilizations of our world, since it begun, all of them that failed, there was a study done, and through the study, they found a common denominator out of the failing of 80 great civilizations. You know what it was? Not the emperor's families, not the ruler's families. You'd think it would have to have a great leader, and a great family. No, it was the family in general, how the society or civilization looked at it. They devalued it and it began to fall away. And when the family began to fall away, that nucleus that held everything together began to fail. Guess what? The civilization began to fail. And so as we look at it this morning, I do want you to understand this, that we are a family and we're not perfect. Proverbs 22:6. Chris, would you show that for me? In Proverbs 22:6, this is a verse that we've probably have memorized. If not, we've been told it enough that we have memorized. And so what does it say? Let's read it together. Train up a child in the way that he should go. Even when he is old, he will not what? Depart from it. Now, this is a proverb, right? It's not a promise. I mean, we wish it was a promise, right? That if we did this every time, it would turn out correct. But not every time it turns out that way. A proverb is a wise saying. I like what Dobson says. Good parents whose kids turn out bad take too much blame. Bad parents whose kids turn out great take too much credit. Okay? And I feel that. Because I do want you to understand, even though we as a society or as a family, as God people who are following Him, want to raise our children. As a youth minister of 27 years, I've been told all kinds of stories. As I've visited families and stuff, I'm not going to make my kid go to church. Why is that parent not going to make his kid go to church? Because he was probably made to go to church, right? And it wasn't a good experience for him. Didn't seem to help him. So why would it help my kid? And then there are some parents, that they were raised in a Christian home, and they're going to make their kids, Christian. And so they force the issue. And there's all kinds of things that, we beat up ourselves. I cannot remember the author of this book, and I can't even remember the title. I was looking for it, and I couldn't find it. But one of these days, I'll find it again. This author, and I thought she had it perfect, because there's all kinds of parenting books out there, right? All kinds of books. Have a new kid by a weekend. If you'll do these steps, your kids will turn out great, and all this stuff. And I loved what this author said, and I think she just hit the nail on the head. She said, God created two perfect kids, placed them in the perfect place, gave them one rule, and they rebelled. What makes you think that you're going to be a better parent than God? I was like, whoa. Because there is something unique in the way that God created you and me. And He told Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. And when they multiplied, their kids kind of looked like them, I'm assuming, because our kids kind of look like us. But they have a different thumbprint, right? They have a little different DNA flowing in them. So the whole idea is that even though we multiply, we don't make people like us. And so it was interesting, as I was reading through this, train up a child in the way that he should go. Well, what is Solomon talking about? What does he mean? How do we train up a child? You know, when that baby is born, you look at it, you love it, you're like, oh man, this is my baby. Now how do I raise it? It didn't come with a manual. I didn't get an owner's manual when Ryan, Lene, or Aaron were born. I wished I had. Guys, I do read some of the owner's manual. I look for the important things, right? You know, when you need to look at it, there it is. Didn't find an owner's manual. Now, I did think it was interesting. Dobson pointed this out in one of his books. He said, the owner's manual is inside of each child. But that's interesting. So stop and think about this for a minute. How do you know? How do you get to know a person? Spend time. Spend time with them. So does that mean we just sit on the couch and just sit there? We got to communicate. We got to ask questions. We get to know the other person. We do activities together, and we get to know them. You know, I love doing mission trips because mission trips do some great things. Okay, they at one point will frustrate everybody on the trip. Okay, they're designed to do that. I think God just sets that up. But because of that, they also push every person to work together. They share a history, and through the history, they share camaraderie, and through camaraderie, they begin to build a friendship. And as Tom talked about, when the couple come together to become one, it's not just sex. It's the whole idea that they become one in body, mind, soul, and spirit. It's the whole idea that they begin to know each other, and they begin to understand the thoughts of the person before they even say them. Because the two can come together and make a better one than the two individuals can be by themselves. It's very unique how God spun this all into motion. And as Samuel, or as Solomon begins to write this proverb down, I was wondering, well, where's he going with this? This is not just a single proverb, I believe, in and by itself, because many times throughout Proverbs, Solomon says, hey, sons, listen to me. Pay attention to wise instruction. Listen, listen, listen. And so I backed up. Now, the Bible's not theologically broken into chapters and verses. God didn't write it in chapters and verses. It just made it easy for us to find out where it is and look it up. So I just backed up to verse 1 and began to read through Proverbs chapter 22 and looking for how do I train up a child? Okay? Because there's one thing that you should know about me as a parent. I was consistent in my parenting. Believe it or not. I was inconsistent at being consistent. Okay? Or I was consistent at being inconsistent. There it is. That is. Okay, look at verse 1. Look at verse 1. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold, right? So what's important here? What's the most important thing in this verse? You can talk. It's okay. A what? A good name. So I got to thinking, okay, how does this apply to training up a child? We should train a child that it's important to develop a good name for yourself, right? A good name for yourself is better than gold, better than silver. It's a better commodity to trade with. I'm finding this out. Took me a while. 51 years old. It takes a while to knock some sense into this head. But it was interesting, this time around, as I'm logging, and I'm going to places, people call me up, hey, I hear you're logging, can you come and cut some trees in our place? And I'm like, sure. So I go look and check it all out. And then I'll say, now, do you want a contract? I have a contract, we can sign a contract here. And it's interesting, I've had so many people go, no, I don't need a contract. I know who you what? Are. I know your name. I know where you live. I know how to find you, you know. And so a good name is a great commodity. Look at verse 2. The rich and poor meet together, and the Lord is the maker of what? Them all. One translation says, the rich and poor shake hands together. We're equal, right? You know, it's interesting, you go to any elementary school, you go to the playground, within 15 minutes, you'll find the hierarchy of that playground, right? Because you'll know who's important and who's not. Kids are mean, aren't they? I mean, they call names, you know, you're not going to be my friend anymore, I'm going to take my toys and go, you know. Parents do the same thing, you know. Adults do the same thing, I'll put that away. Verse 3. So we should teach our children that everyone's equal. Verse 3 says, the prudent see danger and hides himself. This is not like the ostrich hiding his head in the sand and go away, go away, go away. It's the whole idea that the prudent sees danger and they prepare themselves for it. When a child learns to drive and they start driving on their own, they say, bye, Mom, I'm leaving. And what does Mom automatically say? Be careful, all right? 2 words. Always, be careful. And this is what God is saying. We should teach our children. Solomon is saying you need to teach your children, you need to train up your child to see danger. To see danger, to look for it, and prepare for it. When we got a wood stove, and the children were little, wood heat for me is cheap, so I was like, I need a wood stove. So I got a wood stove, built a fire, got it blazing red hot, and took both of my kids' hands and made tattoos with them on the stove, right? You look at me like, did he really do that? You know, the kids are going, no. But I did build a fire and I got it warm. And when I got it warm, I brought the kids close and I took their hand and I forced it to touch the stove. And I told them that this stove is what? I needed them to be careful around it. Didn't burn them, didn't leave tattoo marks, just the idea that they realized this is hot, this could be dangerous. One day I was out in the shop, not thinking about hot, you know, had the cutting torch going, Ryan was pretty small, cut a piece of metal off, and it hit the ground, which it's supposed to do, because I'm not going to grab it, because it's what? And so he immediately reached down and grabbed that thing before I could do anything, you know, and it's like, you know, and then it burned all day long, right? It's like you put ice on it, and it's okay. The simple go on and suffer for it. You know, training up our children is important to show them that we need to help them to become wise and to be careful. We need to help them to become wise and be careful. And we're going to see this a little bit later. Verse 4. I'm just going to go through a few of these to kind of give you an idea of what Solomon's talking about in training up a child in the way he should go. The reward for humility and the fear of the Lord is riches and honor and what? Life. So all Solomon is saying really to his children is that you need to teach them to be humble. A great song that's out there right now that's like hit number 1 in the chart for the year was what? Be humble and what? Kind. Country song. Be humble and kind. Be humble and fear the Lord. Teach them who created them and made them in His image so that they can understand that there is a life giver and a way to live life because He designed it. And help them to be humble with it. You know, as a parent, we play games with our children when they're little, right? We'd race them and we'd let them what? Win. Because we wanted to build their little psyche up, right? You know, we didn't want them to lose and feel like a loser like we did in school. I mean, you know, in school we had A, B, C, D. F is a failure, right? I mean, it was so important that they even skipped a letter in the alphabet and went to F and said, you're a failure, right? It's like my first college paper I got back that I wrote. F. Mr. Heifel wrote on it, Mike, you write like you talk. He lived right behind me down here by the river, and I was like, okay. But at a certain point, as a parent, we begin to beat our children, to show them that there is somebody bigger and stronger and better. I mean, when you think about it, championships, okay, trophies, you know, when people set certain achievements, they're meant to be what? Broken. They're meant to be broken. Records are meant to be broken. And so, in a way, we need to help them to understand what humility is about, win or lose. And to be kind about it. Look at the next verse. He goes on in verse 5 and he says, thorns and snares are the way of the crooked. Not just the crooked road, okay, or people that walk crooked. It's the whole idea of those that are evil. And their way is full of thorns and snares. But whoever guards his soul will keep far from them. I think this is a great verse. How do you guard your soul? Well, what's your soul? I mean, think of it like this. Guarding your soul from the crooked is the idea of who are you? Guarding your soul is understanding God made me in His image, but He's made me a certain way, and I'm different than everybody else. I don't need to act like somebody else, because if I act like somebody else and do what somebody else does, then whatever God designed for me to do, I'm not going to be able to accomplish it, because I'm acting like somebody else. So we want our child to understand their personality, to understand who they are, and help them to accomplish those goals in training them up, in pointing them in the right direction. In verse 6, and we've already read it, but I want to point out a couple of things here. In verse 6, it says, train up a child in the way that he should go. The word train up here, the word train up comes from a Hebrew term that midwives used in when they were helping in the birthing process. When the baby was born, the midwife would create a concoction, a liquid concoction from figs and dates, and it was kind of a sweet and sour sauce that they would mix up. And then they would take that, when they'd take the baby and clean it up, and they would take that sauce and they would dip their finger in it, and they would massage their gums and the roof of their mouth, and they, kind of a cleaning agent. But it was also a way, it was tart. And it made you, kind of, and they would get the sucking sensation going for the child, and they would hand the child to the mother for it to suckle. And that's the term here. We've all heard the term, you can drag a horse to water, but you can't what? I heard that all my life. And then as an adult, I heard the rest of the story. You can't make him drink, but you can do what? You can salt his oats and make him thirsty. And that's the idea of raising up and training a child and pointing him in the right direction, is giving him a hunger and a thirst and a desire to seek for those things, to go after those things. Okay? Let's go on to the next one. Verse 7. Important one. Okay? It says here, the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is what? Slave to the lender. I mean, that's a good thing to teach your children, right? And I told you this a while back. My dad taught me this. I borrowed some money from him as an adult, and I went back to pay it back, and he goes, I don't need your money. Okay. I thought, all right, this is a good deal. I don't have to pay it back. He goes, I don't need your money. I need your time. That was a big commodity. I didn't have a lot of time. But he wanted my time. He wanted my hands. He wanted my feet. He wanted me to do things for him. He wanted me to work it back. I became his slave. I worked it off. I couldn't pay it off. Had money in hand. Oh, it'd been so much easier to do that. But I realized at that certain point, boy, if I ever, and I would, anytime I borrowed money, I would fret over it. I would do the numbers. I would crunch. Everything I needed to do and make sure, is this something for me to do? And then I'd go to the banker thinking he's going to turn me down, and he'd go, oh, sure, scare me to death again. Then I'd go back and crunch the numbers, and, can I do this? And so the whole idea is we have to be careful with this. The rich rule over the poor, and that's what the world is. Pretty much might makes right. And so we need to teach our children to understand these principles. Look at the next one, verse 8. Whoever sows injustice will what? Reach calamity, okay? Will reap that. In other words, I think Paul said it this way, whatever a man sows, that shall he also reap. Paul said it in Galatians that, don't quit doing good works. Because it's hard. Because whatever a man sows, that's what he's going to reap. So, teach them to do the right thing, to do good for others. He talks about it, verse 9. Whoever has a bountiful eye will be blessed, and he shares his bread with who? The poor. It's important to teach our children to share. I see parents do this all the time. A kid walks up and sees another toy that he hadn't seen and realizes he needs that toy, and he grabs that toy and he begins to walk off, and the parent's like, come here, you got to share. You got to share. And when a person has the right kind of sight to see as God sees, they will do what God does. And they will share with those in need. A couple more, verse 10. Drive out a scoffer, and strife will go out, and quarreling and abuse will cease, right? You ever been around those people who are always dramatic? There's always something going on. Here he talks about, he says, don't let them scoff. That's not a word we use much anymore. But you understand this term, don't let them mock others. Don't we do that? Haven't your kids mocked you? They start saying what you say. Like, quit repeating me. Don't they do that to their friends? Stop and think about this. Late night TV and comedians, how did they get their laughs? They mock a lot of people. They make fun of a lot of people. Help them to see who those people, whose image they're created in. And Jesus simply said, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, but to love your what? Neighbor as yourself. And that's what he talks about here. That we should treat someone or something more important than ourselves. Don't treat them with contempt. Treat them that they're valuable. I used to walk out every Tuesday morning with a cup of coffee and meet the guy that I affectionately called Trash Man Joe. He picked up our trash. And I would be there because he'd come early enough, and I would take out a cup of coffee to him. And we would talk, and he would tell me about his cedar trees that he had that were so big, and where he lived, and his family, and just had a little conversation there. It was awesome. I was at the house in Gentry, and I was walking out, and the electric crew comes in, the tree trimming, brush trimming crew, and they come up there, and they were beginning to work, and they walked over and said, hey, we're going to be in here and trimming. Is that okay? And I'm like, sure, that'd be awesome. Hey, I've got a tree over here. Could you take this one down? Because it's right over the power pole, and I'd like to have it gone. I've done that all my life and thought, well, hey, they're here while they're here. He goes, well, we really can't do that because it's past the point of where we're supposed to cut. Okay, and I was like, okay. Do you guys want a cup of coffee? They're like, sure, that'd be awesome. So I went in, fixed coffee, brought it out to them, left, and said, thanks, guys, and went on. When I come back, my tree was gone. I was like, yes, thank you, Lord. But just the whole idea that we need to treat others that they're important no matter what they do. Here's another verse that I've heard parents use a lot in raising their children. It's on down. It's called verse 15. Maybe you've seen this. Folly is bound up in the what? Heart of a child. But the what? Rod of discipline, right? You know. What's the phrase? Save the rod, spare the rod, spoil the child, right? So I'm going to bust him good, make him, it's like, I kind of wish I had tasers. When my kids were growing up, that would have been good, right? I'll teach you to mouth me back, boy. Okay? That's okay. I just did what my dad did. Here, hold this spark plug wire and see if it's got a little spark, or batteries. Yeah. Take the 9-volt battery, touch it to your tongue, take it out. All right. But the rod of discipline drives it far from him. I want you to think about this. Did you know the Bible is called the canon? Was another term made for it? And it's not like a cannon like boom, A cannon, it's a measuring rod. A reed. A measuring reed. So think about this. Folly is bound up in a child. What's folly? Foolishness. I looked it up. It said lack of good sense. You ever know kids with that lack of common sense? You just wanted to slap their mamas and daddies? Or them, I told Zach one day, he was working with me out here, and I said, Zach, when I see your dad, I'm going to slap him. And he looked at me like, have you seen my dad? He's a big old boy. Lack of good sense. And he's like, why do you want to slap my dad? Because he didn't teach you this that I'm teaching you right now. I expected you already know this stuff. We love picking on each other. So, folly. Think of it like this. A costly, ornamental building with no practical purpose. In other words, we need to train our children in a way that they benefit God's kingdom and others. That they have a purpose. We all want to know what our purpose is in life. We ask that question. And if we base it on a few principles that we pick up here and there with the idea of how do I know the way my child needs to go? We watch them. We study them. We listen to them. We take notes. We begin to point them in that direction. When they have dreams, we see if they can accomplish that dream. Sometimes we lay out practical steps and show them, this is not practical for you. It's like Ryan, one time he comes to me, he's a senior in high school, and we saw this guy. He was a great engineer, and he was building, these go-karts and dune buggies and things like that. And he goes, I think I want to be a biomechanical engineer. Because, he loves cars, and he loves building them and painting them and all this stuff. And I'm like, so how's your math? He goes, ooh, that's not good. I said, buddy, that's going to, that's something you're going to have to work on if that's the way you want to go. How long do you have to go to school for that? A while. Oh, you just help them to see this is practical. You begin to see how God created them, how God molded them, and you begin to point them in that direction. And you begin to help them. And you know what? You say, well, I don't have any kids at home now. They're all grown and gone on. Well, you got grandkids. But I can also tell you this, your kids always need you. They always have questions. Because there's something that they haven't experienced yet in life that you've already experienced, and they're going to go, what do you think? So, the rod of discipline is really discipleship. And it's the idea of how do we grow them? What's our measuring rod? Do you have those marks in your home where your kids grow? Every year, how you mark, And Aaron's so excited because now he's got the tallest mark on the post, you know. But the whole idea is that we want our children to grow up, right? We want our children to eat solid food, right? We want them to grow into the person God created them to be, so that even as a parent, our relationship grows along with them. And that's important, because we're always training up. You know, children lack common sense because they lack experience, they lack instruction, and it's our job to bring it to them so that they can understand the disciplines in life that help them to grow into the mature person that God's created them to be. And so instead of nations falling and failing because of the lack of the family, it's important for us to realize who God has created us to be. And I have one short story, and I want you to go home and read it. But it's found in 1 Samuel, chapters 1 through 3. Talk about Samuel, one of the greatest prophets of God. Hannah, his mother, before Samuel was born, couldn't have children. Tried, couldn't have children. Would go and just pray to God and sacrifice. God, please allow me. Because it's so important to have a man child to carry on the name of the family, to be a part of the family of God, the nation of Israel. Hannah could not provide a child, and she prayed. One time she was so distraught that she was crying, just bubbly, just making all kinds of, how women do when they get that emotional. That the priest, Eli, was looking down and he was like, "Are you drunk?" She's like, "Look what time it is." "No. I am seeking God, and I'm asking God to provide a child." She prayed so earnestly that if God would provide a child, she would give it back to God. And God did. Samuel. She raised Samuel to the point to where he could go off on his own. And she took him back, literally took him back to the synagogue, to the temple, and said, "Here, God gave me a child, and I'm giving him back to God." And Samuel became a caretaker of the temple. And Eli, the priest, used him, and it was like his extra set of hands. And so the story goes on like this, that one night Samuel was asleep, and he heard, "Samuel, Samuel." So he gets up and he runs to Eli, who's sleeping, and he wakes him up, and he's like, What do you need?" Eli's like, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." So he goes back to bed, second time he's sleeping, and he hears, "Samuel, Samuel." And so he gets up and he runs into Eli. "Eli, what do you need? What do you need?" I didn't call you. Go to bed. It's all right." So he goes back to sleep the third time, and "Samuel, Samuel." And he gets up and he runs, and, Eli's like, "Okay, I'm awake. I did not call you." But he perceived that God was trying to get his attention. He said, "Here's what I need you to do." And parents, this is good advice. When you hear that again, just say, "Speak, Lord, your servant's listening." So Samuel goes back to bed and hears, "Samuel, Samuel." Samuel wakes up and he goes, "Here I am, Lord. Speak to me." God gave him some rough news. He said, "Samuel, everybody that has an ear and hears these words is going to realize I'm going to carry out my judgment on Eli because he did not raise his sons the way that they needed to be raised. They rebelled so bad and he just let them go that I'm going to hold him accountable. And so in turn, I'm going to remove him from the priesthood. All of them are going to die." Wow, that's heavy news to tell a kid, right? Gets up the next morning and Eli's like, "Hey, God talked to you?" "Yeah." "What'd he say?" "I don't think I really want to tell you." Eli's like, No, tell me. So he tells him. Eli with a heavy heart goes, "Wow, He's right. And then later it says this, just right after that. Eli said, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. And all of Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established as the prophet of God, and the Lord appeared again at Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. He became a great spokesperson for God. So here this morning, we are here to help you to understand that we can't raise your kids. We can only support you to raise your kids. And so we want to help you as a resource, as a tool that you can use in your arsenal in raising your kids. And so Kyle has a great explanation of this.
So, how many Skittles is in this jug? All of them. Chris is right, all of them. Except for we got some here, so you're wrong. But this is representative of the number of weeks that you have with your child from the time they're born to the time they're 18. How many weeks is that? 936. Yeah, 936 weeks. So you have 936 weeks to make a difference in their life. By the time they're 9, you have 468, if my math is correct. But as church leaders, we only get about 52 weeks. This is 52 Skittles. I counted out all of these, me and Shaylin, so hopefully it is correct, but there is 52 in this one, I know that. But 52 weeks, we have 52 weeks to have Christian life influence on their life. That is, compared to your influence and my influence, that's nothing. I could eat 52 Skittles in one bite. But 52 weeks, if we really want to get down to the nitpicky, it's probably only about 40 weeks because you got holidays, vacations, sick days, sports activities, etc. You have a lot of other things that you're probably not going to come to church for, but like Tom's model, we want to expand the influence. We want to be there to resource you. We want you to be able to influence the children in your home and other children, like the electron sharing that Tom was talking about. That's part of the influence that your husband and wife or your mother and father can be to your children. It's not feasible for me to be that primary source of influence in your child's life, and then for them to turn out as a Christian leader or as just a good follower of Christ. But I got a resource that we can help you do that, and that's my job, is to help resource you guys to have an impact on your child. And I've got a devotional. It's called Dinner Table Devotions. You just take this book, stick it right in the middle of your dinner table, and you guys have a devotion every time you sit down. It's not some big thing that you got to be a big preacher or you got to know a lot of theological background or history or nothing. It's just got scripture and some discussion questions that you guys can communicate your faith, because as Josh talked about, it is important in your child's life that you are open about that, and that's what I'm here for. I want to help you guys have an impact on your child's life.
Because that's what we realize, is that it's so important you to share stories. You know, have you shared your salvation story with your children? I sat with a mother on her deathbed and was talking to her and asked her salvation story, and her grown daughters had never heard that story. and that gave them peace and comfort. And so I was preparing, working with my uncle as I was preparing his daughter's funeral. And I asked him, as we were talking about it, and he somehow said, well, when did you accept Christ? I didn't even know he went to church. That's how private he was. And he told me about his story where he accepted Christ at the Baptist camp here in Salem Springs. Share your stories. And just eating dinner around the table and being able to talk about a few things will open up stories that you begin to share. And I love listening to those stories. I loved going to grandparents' house and listening to those stories and hearing those stories and hearing stories of how they grew up and what they did and all that. So this will just spark conversation, and it'll help you to continue to grow and share the stories like these rocks do when students see them. When they ask questions. Because God specifically said, write the scriptures on your gates, on your doorposts. Set up rocks, set up things to help you to remember to tell them stories of what God has done in your life. And that's what we want to encourage you to do, because that's what God's doing. So we have books for you guys. And so if you're a parent and you have kids at home, and we want you to sit down, and there's 365 of them, so you got a whole year of devotions, okay? And it's not all right, you're going to sit down, we're going to do this, we're going to get it done. But just the idea to spark those stories. If you're a grandparent and your kids are coming, your grandkids are coming over to your house, or you might be parents again, being grandparents and having to watch. Here's some things that you can help instill into your kids. So we have these here for you, and we want to encourage you to use them for His kingdom, His honor, and His glory. So Kyle's going to be up here. He's going to be handing these out. And so as we dismiss, I do want you to understand that the student ministry this morning, they prepared lunch for you guys. And we're asking that you would give a small donation or a big donation, that would be fine too, to the youth ministry. That'll help them. And I am really encouraged of what they've come up with and how they put it together. So I want to encourage you to stay and have lunch with us. You don't have to, but I want to encourage you to do that. They've worked hard, put it together. And come and grab one of these books and take it and use it. Like I said, put it on the dinner table and use it. That'll be awesome. Coming up next week, the Alaska mission team is going to be sharing about their experience. We're glad to have them back all in one piece, and everything works good, all fingers and toes. And so they'll be sharing about their experiences while they were there in Alaska. And then also understand that there's some more information there in your bulletins. Take those with you. Really glad that you're here this morning, being a part of what we're doing. And so encourage these guys on their way out. Kyle, would you? Yes, Tom? Oh, yes.
Study process in discipleship. And of course, Mark shared a little bit last week with you, and others will be in the future. But next Sunday at my house, right after lunch, we're going to have a meal for any men who are interested in beginning this process with us. Some of you have already talked to. If you haven't been able to talk to me, talk to me. I'll give you directions to my house, whatever. That'll be next Sunday. We'll be there for a couple of hours is all. And then probably the next Sunday we'll be starting a new, probably two different groups will be meeting. So just want to encourage you about that, and get with me if you don't understand this. But if you're interested, we want you to be a part of next Sunday's meal with us, where we can share with you.
And then if there's some ladies that are interested in it, talk to Peg. So Peg is sitting right there. So, all right. Would you all stand as Kyle prays over us?